if you don't know who your people are and you take a DNA test and you see, you've got this massive amount of DNA that comes from Italy. If you go back to Italy and walk on the soil there, would you consider that communing with your spirit ancestors?
Yes, I would, actually. In fact, I did that last late summer, actually. I am half Norwegian. My mother's entire family is from Norway, and I had never been to Norway before. So I wanted to not just travel as a tourist, but to go there and kind of mend the fabric of my mitochondrial DNA. For my mother's whole family came from that place. So I collected stones here, one from my land, one from each one of my sisters from where they live, and also from my mother where she lives. And I carried them back to Norway, and I got to visit the family farm. I was introduced by a distant cousin there who helped me to meet the new owner of that property. And I was able to do a ritual where I installed these little pebbles into the stone wall on the farm, and then was able to take stones back from there with the permission of the spirits of the land, and take one for myself and give one to my one sister, one to the second sister, and also to my mother. So it's possible to feel that sense of connection. And I think it's useful. While it's not always possible to go back to the land where your ancestors are from, I think it's useful to find some way to connect. If you can't get there in person, perhaps you can make contact with someone who's traveling who can bring you back a stone, bring you back a little bit of earth, for you to put onto your altar and say, okay, this was my family's home. Now my family's home is here. Now my family's home is in my heart. You can do a ritual that feels, a ceremony that feels authentic to you. Whatever is in your heart is what spirits want to hear. They don't want to hear something you wrote down and labored over. They want to hear what your heart is speaking to you about. And you say to them, I am living here in North America, but my roots are somewhere else. And I want to feel as though the whole of my family tree, roots and all, is intact, in whatever ways make sense to you. And you find a way to take some of that soil or a stone and honor that you are now back together. Because I think as North Americans, I can't say anything about how South Americans feel about this, but I think North Americans suffer from being displaced people. They are displaced most by choice. Some were forced to come here in the hulls of ships. Some were indentured servants or slaves. But in either case, there was a tear in the fabric. Even if it was one that was a choice, there was still a tear in the fabric. And I think of, I have some clients that are Irish, and there's one that I worked with for a long time that he felt that tear keenly in his life 3 generations after his ancestors came to North America. And that tear needs to be attended to in one way or the other. Yes, it's a what so, as my partner would say. It is a real thing. We are no longer in that homeland, but what is it that I can do to reweave that fabric? So it might be asking the spirits of the ancestors from that place, those ancestors from that place, your physical blood ancestors or the spirits of the land or both, to help me to reweave that inside of myself, so that I feel as though I'm standing on both feet. I'm feeling with roots in this place. I think our displaced nature makes us hungry for, well, if you think about the United States manifest destiny, we somehow had to keep going for the land that's over the next hill. And I think it's the source maybe of colonialism in some ways. There's this desire for land and desire for something better, always better, better, better. And that drive may be useful, but I think it also comes from a place of woundedness, of recognizing that somehow we are not enough. Where we are is not enough, that there's a longing, a hunger for something to be resolved. And I think in many cases, that reconnection with our family place, our reconnection to the old land, our reconnection to the people that came before us is a way for our fabric to be strong wherever we happen to be planted.
Okay, wow. Thank you for that. That was beautifully put, and I think that'll be really very helpful to those who have that question. Now, we were talking about people who don't know their parents, don't know their ancestors, but there's also a large segment of the population who don't want to know their ancestors. Maybe their parents weren't so so loving, possibly even abusive. So, in your view, how can someone access their ancestors if they don't really want to? How do you get supportive guidance from ancestors that go beyond the ones that may have been abusive?
Sometimes you have to skip a few generations. You know, based on the circumstances, sometimes people are poor parents, or there are disruptive households where people don't feel as though they had been nurtured. But the ancestors are an enormous pool of individuals. And through journeys, through meditation, you can ask for a spirit mother and a spirit father to come to you. They may come to you in their dreams. You may meet them in a journey. You may meet them in a meditation. And you want a loving mother and father from your ancestral line. The spirits of those beings can do repair. And it really is repair of the child inside of us that did not feel nurtured and cared for. They can step in and fill in the gaps. Back to that weaving, they can fill in the pieces that, maybe we had parents that could only do this. They didn't have the rest of the fabric available to them for one reason or another. So the spirits of our ancestors, in terms of a spirit father and a spirit mother, an ancestral mother and ancestral father, they can help to step in to put those pieces in place. So we have a better sense of our kind of spiritual and literal legitimacy. There's something about not feeling connected to family that gives you a feeling of not quite being legitimate, not quite being real, and to have those spirits of ancestors filling that role also helps us to cut more slack for the ones that didn't quite have it together. We can let go of our anger, our disappointment, when we know that there are other beings who care for us completely.